Well, joining me here on Christmas Clatter to talk about a book he wrote and other Christmas things is Anthony Caruso of Tis the Podcast. He's no stranger to Christmas Clatter. He's been here many times in many capacities. And thanks again for joining me, Anthony.
Well, thanks again for having me, Todd. I'm excited, and I'm always happy to be on Christmas Clatter. It's always a good time. I'm always happy you keep inviting me back, and I haven't offended you to the point I'm disinvited.
Oh, you'd have to really go overboard more than I think you're really capable of to do that. It's just always fun to have you.
It's always fun to be here.
Yeah, it's always fun to have some banter back and forth. It's kind of gets stale if everybody agrees all the time. So
that's for sure.
I asked you on here because you are doing something a little bit special with Tis the Podcast. It started, I don't know, about 9 weeks ago or so now.
I think it's almost closer to 12 weeks.
12 weeks ago now, you started putting out a chapter of a book you have written, and you're putting out a chapter on Thursdays, written by narrated by special guests and yourself and Tom and Julia from Tis the Podcast. And just kind of take us back to the beginning of this, because every good idea starts just as a little half thought in your mind. So just take us back to, the idea and the journey of getting a book actually written, to be able to produce this.
Whew, okay. Chapter 1, I was born. No.
I'll just mute my mic and you take it over from here.
I guess just for a little background on my love for writing, that goes back to when I could first learn to hold a pencil. I was always big into reading from a very young age, being read to and reading. And the minute I was able to hold a pencil, I was always writing some type of story. So I've wanted to be first a screenwriter and then an author for years, and it's still an ambition of mine. The genesis of this particular story goes back 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Let's say I've been at my current job 3 years, and I think I started writing this 3 years prior. So I wanted to write a Christmas story because I love Christmas. I wanted to challenge myself and write something. I want to write a timeless Christmas story, which is, hard to do because anyone who listens to Tis the Podcast and has listened to the amount of movies we've covered in 3 years, only a handful are timeless, right? So I thought, well, what's more time? And this kind of gets into a little bit of spoiler detail, but not really, because I think if you've been listening to my book, it's obvious where it's going or what it's inspired by. So I thought, well, it would be cool to do a modern day take on the nativity story. Mm-hmm. And set it in modern day and just what that would look like in modern day. And so I pitched it to my wife, and she thought it was a good idea, but she wanted me to initially go darker. She was like, "Oh, you can make Mary like a con artist. She's just she had just been with multiple men, and she doesn't want to tell her boyfriend, so she says it's a virgin birth, and she just leads everything on, and the lie spirals out of control." And I was like, that's dark. And easily disproven by science. If a boyfriend wanted to test right away. So I was like, well, I don't know if I want to do that, but I also don't know if I want to do the whole virgin birth thing either.
Right.
So I was like, well, what if I just do a story about a woman named Mary who gets pregnant and is left by her fiance, her boyfriend, whoever, and another kindly gentleman steps in and helps her get through this pregnancy, and they fall in love. So that's where that genesis started. And so I was like, okay, well, if Mary and Joseph are easy to translate into modern day, easy enough, but you also need the other members of the nativity story, right? So you need the three kings. Well, who are the nearest things to the three kings nowadays? Well, you would pick 3 world leaders. So the president was an obvious choice, and I was like, well, go with America's biggest allies, England and Canada.
Right.
Again, that went through some genesis too, because when I started writing this, it was in the midst of a very famous president who I won't get into, but I was like, do I base? I for a long time I considered basing that particular king, quote unquote, on that president and giving him kind of like a Scrooge arc where his heart kind of melts in the end. And I was like, that may be a little too topical, and he's a little too divisive, so let's not do that.
Yeah, it's supposed to be wise. It's supposed to be wise men.
Exactly. And of course I did put the modern twist on it, right? Like I picked 2 of the leaders as women and then 1 man. And then I was like, I know he's not an official part of the nativity story in the Bible, and he's in some Christmas pageants and some not, but the little drummer boy, I figured it would be nice to have like a kid aspect to the story as well. Yep. So that's how I came up with him. And then the shepherd. So it's like, well, shepherds, I just need people showing up at this, nativity. So I figured, well, it's going to be set in New York City, because from the beginning, it was always going to be set there, because it had to be set there, because in my opinion, there's no place like New York City on Christmas.
Right.
So I was like, okay, well, NYPD, constant presence in the city. And then I was like, well, shepherds need animals. Okay, animal control. Get somebody from animal control. And then as a way to tie the story together, okay, put a student, like a college journalist in here, and she's going around the city doing some kind of Christmas fluff piece, so she can kind of like bridge this, interweave the stories a bit before they interweave toward the end.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there were 6 different story threads here. And it's like, well, that's no problem. Love Actually did something like that, right? And weaved it all together. But writing it as a book versus a movie was very different and a lot harder. Well, I mean, I've never tried to write it as a movie, but I'd imagine it's a lot harder because, like, you can't, like, cut back and forth between paragraphs. Like, you have to kind of segregate them into chapters. So what I did was I wrote, for example, Mary and Joseph's story first. Then I took them all and wrote them through one at a time, printed it all out, rearranged them like a puzzle, and then opened a new document and retyped it all.
Oh, wow.
While, I had it all down so that I can make them blend a little better. And that's how it happened. And I'll say this too. One of the hardest things for me with writing is I finished rough drafts of a lot of different stories over the years. I can never come up with a good title. Right. But the title for this one came to me pretty quickly. I was like, well, it's based on The Christmas Story. I can't call it A Christmas Story because there's a famous movie with that. Right. So I'll call it Another Christmas Story. And I always had it in my mind, like the title, if it ever got published, like the cover art would have the crossed out, crossed out, and then another in like italics or something.
Yeah.
So that's really the genesis of the idea.
Wow. That's awesome. I applaud you for all that effort in it. And I know it was a labor of love and then the fact that you get to share it with everybody this year as a Advent until Christmas is fantastic, and been enjoying it.
So the idea for that came from like, well, first I will say I think you personally would make a better movie. So if any Hollywood executive is listening or any kind of agent is listening, hit me up.
Right.
elves@tissapodcast.com. But the reason I decided, and I have dabbled in writing like screenplays over the years, but the reason I decided to do this as a book, quite honestly, was the fact that in my research, I found it was easier to get a literary agent and for people to get published than a screenwriting agent.
Yes.
Especially because worst comes to worst, you can self-publish. Self-publish.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that. Have you ever considered this, like the self-publish program Amazon offers or anything like that?
So speaking of holiday books, a back in 2012, 2014, I started the job 2012, 2014. Yeah, so 2014, you've listeners of the podcast will have heard her on Patreon a few times. My friend Lauren, she was a coworker at somewhere at one of the companies I worked at, and she's an aspiring writer as well. And we wrote a very cynical office comedy book, but set at like a corporate North Pole.
Uh-huh.
And the chapters, there are 12 chapters, one for each month of the year. And like all the holidays were part of this corporate North Pole. So you had like the Boogeyman, Santa Claus, like kind of like you think the Santa Claus Council of Legendary Figures.
Right.
That was just cynical. It was like corporate. It was kind of like a take, poking fun at how commercialized holidays have become. And it was like a very adult book, but we self-published that. I don't think it's up anymore because I think a year or two ago we were both like, let's take that down because we both grown so much as writers. But I was self-published on Amazon, and it's hard, like, because Amazon has very specific formatting restrictions. Like it's not easy to do. Like it takes a lot of effort. So by the time you write this book, edit this book, re-edit this book, re-edit this book, then you have to go on Amazon and spend another like year reformatting.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize all that. I just thought that click, and you're done. So,
I mean, you could. I know there are people. I mean, it's so easy to self-publish. So, like, if you go on Amazon to the self-publish section, there are lots of things that probably shouldn't be published.
Right.
Not to like make fun of anyone's writing, because I don't do that. But there are a lot of things that wouldn't get published. You know what I mean?
Yeah, probably certain topics or things people touch on that shouldn't be published, not necessarily because of their skills, but.
Right. And I feel like a lot of self-published authors probably could get published. It's just a matter of finding someone to publish them.
Right.
But there are definitely that small section on Amazon that probably would never get published for various reasons. And you could always tell them when you're searching those books because they didn't even put the time in to format them. Right. So they probably just literally uploaded, clicked publish, and then didn't even care that everything looks awful when you download it. So I didn't want to self-publish another Christmas story because normally, well, not even normally, I am, even of this book, I'm very critical of my writing.
Yes.
But, and I always thought this would make a better movie. So I had in my mind, like, well, it's becoming more and more common nowadays, like The Martian. The author of that book, which ultimately became the Matt Damon movie. Yep. I forget the author's name, but he published a chapter a week online. People would give him feedback, and he'd incorporate that feedback into the next chapter, publish the next chapter, and it was kind of its ongoing story that garnered enough attention that eventually the right person found it, signed him onto an agency, and the rest is history. 50 Shades of Grey, that woman did the same thing. That started as like fan fiction, I think, for
Twilight, I think.
Yeah. And eventually, but she started online. Like what became the crux of her story started via fan fiction online, and somebody picked her up and she reworked it. So I was like, so it's possible. So I was like, well, via Tis the Podcast, we have a listener base. This is a Christmas story. I don't know if I'll ever get published, and I'm very proud of this story in general, so I should take advantage of the base we have on the podcast and do it. Publish, like, it would be a cool countdown to Christmas. Yeah. And when I asked Tom and Julia, they were all for it. They were like, yeah, go for it. That's no problem. So originally it was just going to be I'd self-publish a chapter online leading up to the holidays. And then I thought, well, it would be really cool if we did a bonus episode every week, audio version. Right. And I was like, man, that's a lot for me to read, though, because I'm not going to burden Tom and Julia for reading half this book, too, because it's a beast. It is a beast. And that's part of the reason I think, it's hard to get published, too. First-time authors, unless it's something really special and the right person happens across your work, there's a word count. So I was like, well, it would be cool to make this like an interactive thing, get the other Christmas podcast hosts and some of our more frequent interactive listeners like, April Riley or Michelle Kidwell, or, the ones you always see interacting on our social media pages, to read some chapters and kind of make it this big collaborative project to bring it to life. And,
Yeah.
and Tom and Julie thought that was a great idea, especially because I'm the one editing and putting it all together.
Yeah, they're not doing anything. They're like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's Thursday, so we're not doing anything.
Yeah, you just have to read a few chapters throughout the year, and that's fine. They're fine with that. So when I started asking, like, you and Jerry and April and everyone, you were all very enthusiastically agreed to help me bring this to life, and I am still so honored and blown away. And I was even more honored and blown away when I started releasing the episodes and saw people are actually into it and look forward to it every week. And it's cool because I write a lot. I have a lot of quote unquote finished things, but I don't often put my writing out there for other people to see. And so this was a big risk for me, and I have been blown away by people's kindness and that people are taking this journey to Christmas 2021 with me and these characters and this story.
Yeah. Once this year's over, maybe you could consider moving it to another podcast feed and having it sit out there as a evergreen content for, on podcast feeds, for people to listen to.
Yeah, I have been playing around with some ideas what I might do after this year.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I have some ideas.
Interesting. I was thinking too, like, well, maybe you could put it on PDF and sell the PDFs or something like that. But then when you do that, then you run the risk of people copying it, and doing that kind of stuff. And
right. Yeah. So
don't want to be giving too many people digital copies of things.
Right. And one of the good things about releasing this via the podcast every week as well is, like, if anyone tried to steal it, there's a dated audio record online somewhere. Like, whoa, no, this was done long before you tried to publish this, my friend.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing about writing is it still holds such a prestige, even though we're in this age of digital media, as far as video and audio and stuff. But it's like anytime there's a expert on something, whether they're a doctor or whatever their expertise is, their number one intro to get your attention is New York Times best-selling author.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's a prestige to someone who's written a book and had it sell well. And, because they'll it's like the number one headliner for people's names. And I was never much of a writer. I kind of never enjoyed it. And then until I got older, and then I've written a few things here and there, but nothing as long as an actual novel or book or anything. In fact, last Christmas I sit down to write something, and it turned out completely different than I thought, and it was just a little short story about if the Grinch really stole Christmas for good.
Oh, that's awesome!
And try to have a little twist at the end of it.
Did you ever put that out there? I don't think I saw that. Did you put that on like ChristmasClatter.com or anything? Wait, maybe I did. You sent that to me, right? Yeah, I do remember that now that you mentioned it.
I think I put it up as a blog post or something, and it was just kind of on a whim, and it was okay. But,
the thing about the one writing tip I'll give anyone is, and I got this writing tip from Stephen King, actually, because Stephen King has an awesome book for anyone who wants to be a writer. It's Stephen King on Writing. And so there are two types of writers, planners and not planners. You take someone like J.K. Rowling, she's obviously a planner because she planned 7 books that are so intricately plotted that, you can go back to book 2 when there are hints for something that's happening in the final book, for example. And then you have Stephen King, who has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then he said so many times his characters, when he's writing, will go in different directions he never anticipated, and he'll just follow them down rabbit holes. And I feel like that's kind of the writer I've become when I write. Like, and I feel like that's a good thing, because good writers, like, you want your characters to feel real. So if you're writing about a character and they're telling you, I wouldn't do this, even though you're trying to make me do it, you know what? Trust that instinct and go with them.
Right.
Although I will say that's probably also why Stephen King is known for his unruly endings and unruly lengthed books, because he follows them all over the place.
Right.
And
Yeah, it's got to end somewhere, so we'll wrap it up in the next 13 sentences, and we'll be done.
Yeah. So I mean, I suffer from that too. I mean, this is a long book, and that's my wife's biggest criticism of it. Like she said, like, I mean, she's not as big a Christmas fan as like you or I or anyone listening to this, right? But her thing is like, if somebody's going to sit down to read a Christmas book, they're going to want something kind of short, fluffy. They can read in front of the fire over like 1 or 2 nights, like nothing overly long. And my book is long, which is why it's counting. It started in January and it's counting down to December 23rd. It's like 700 pages.
Yeah.
In my defense, it's like 6 different storylines.
Right. You have 6 different short stories here, or not short stories, but medium length stories you're trying to put together.
Right. And she suggested like, oh, why don't you just cut out like the shepherds, like keep keep the little drummer boy, the kings, and Mary and Joseph. And I'm like, so as an experiment, I did just take out all those pages on my computer, and it's still overly long. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to leave it as is. I am a true believer in what's meant to be is meant to be. What will happen will happen. And if something is meant to happen with it, it'll happen. But in the meantime, I'm glad that I have found a way to release it for people to read.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But like to the earlier point about what I said about I think it would make a better movie, I think that is true. Like I'm very happy. So this isn't dropping till May, right? When is this dropping?
It'd probably drop a little quicker than I think. Well, 2 weeks. It'd be 2 weeks from this upcoming Tuesday. So.
Okay, so either way, at this point, we're up to like chapter 13, 14 by the time you're hearing this. And like, I was so glad to get over like the chapter 7 hump, because at that point, it's like, none of these chapters have anything to do with previous ones, because I'm introducing all these different characters. But now I'm at the point, all the main characters, so it's just flashing back and forth, and you can kind of get a feel for what this book is feeling. Yeah. Whereas if it was a movie, that could probably all have been done within the span of like 10 minutes, rather than 7 chapters over the course of 7 weeks.
Right. Well, see, that's the thing. That's I read chapter 7, and I was like, I need to go back and listen to this again, just to kind of remember what's going on. And I listened to it, and I'm like, this has nothing to do with what I'm reading.
Well, right, you read The Cops, right?
The Cops, yeah.
Yeah, that was the first time they were introduced.
Right.
So the only thing that was referenced in a previous chapter was the president is coming to town for Christmas Eve. So, yeah, but we're at the point now. I mean, when we're recording this, chapter 11 will drop tomorrow in the Tissa podcast feed. And by the time you get to chapter 12, Mary and Joey will be reunited for the first time since the prologue. And I'm excited because that's when really the story starts picking up. So I'm excited that, whoever has stuck with me this long and put their faith in my writing and the story, like now they're going to get rewarded, because it's going to really snowball from here.
Right. And see, those introductory chapters, like you said, 1 through 7, and you've been saying that, it's like a movie. Those can be taken care of in like 3 minutes in a movie.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Because you don't have to set up because you dedicate so many words to like appearance, what the room they're in looks like, internal monologues. While in a movie, a lot of it's implied. And your eyes are picking up on what would take 4 pages of text to convey. Right. So, yeah.
It's like you mentioned Love Actually. It's like the most famous scene from Love Actually has like no words in it. It's just a guy dropping signs.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. Like, that's actually a fun exercise, right? Like, now picture if that was a book. That would probably be like 10 pages in a book.
But you'd be like, he's holding a poster board that says... blah, 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 and he drops it in the floor, and there's another one that says...
Right, that says blah, 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 and then it would be like his heart raced as he tried to read her expression, and then it would go to her inner monologue, what she's thinking, and all of that can be conveyed in like again, 30 seconds in a movie,
Right.
and their inner monologue is conveyed by how the actor's looking. So, yeah. So I would love, like somebody said, you should submit to Hallmark. So I looked at Hallmark, and Hallmark is great for taking submissions. I mean, you watch Hallmark Channel every year around Christmas, yeah, they probably will take any type of Christmas submission, and anyone can submit via their website, but they also have stringent rules like, okay, we want like 150 pages max, and nothing past rated PG. And I'm like, well, mine's PG-13. Like,
Yeah.
And plus, no offense to Hallmark, I'd prefer if like Netflix or somebody picked it up instead. But
yeah, because they'd put it through the Hallmark wash, and then it wouldn't be the same.
Right. I mean, no offense to any of them, but I love, everyone knows, who knows me knows I love Danica McKellar, but I don't want her playing my main character. I don't want her playing Mary.
Right. Well, they just have their style, and they need to stick with it and find them.
Right, exactly.
Having
Having said that, if anyone from Hallmark is listening, I'm not going to scoff at you if you want to read my book. Like, put it through the Hallmark ringer if it's going to get it out there.
Right.
It's just not my
They sell books too. They publish books too.
Oh, I have been in that section of Barnes and Nobles many times, and Hallmark's formulaic. It is what it is, but like, those books, if you covered the authors' names on any of them, all the covers look alike, all the synopsises sound the same. You would think the same person wrote every single one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's
but
comforting around Christmas. I get it. I mean, that's their winning formula. God bless them.
Yeah, until it stops working, just keep doing it.
I mean, considering they haven't announced how many movies this year, but last year was what, like 45 new ones they put out. Like, I'd imagine
too,
at least. Yeah, so you're probably looking at 60 this year.
Yeah, because they haven't even started filming them yet. I imagine they don't usually start till like late June or July.
Right.
They're like a factory.
Again, so yeah, they're a factory. They probably bang out a movie in like 2 weeks. Yeah, I mean, when you consider that their actresses are in every movie, they probably have. Candace Cameron Bure is probably going from, okay, I'm on the set of this movie one day, then tomorrow I'm the big city girl instead of the country girl, and I'm on the set of that movie tomorrow.
Right. I think I read somewhere that, principal photography and filming takes place in like 10 days or less.
For Hallmark. I mean, that makes sense. So one thing that surprises me, I don't know if you know this about like theatrical films, unless it's something like crazy, like your Star Wars, Marvel, Harry Potter, but like you're talking your average comedy or drama, like League of Your Own, perfect movie. Everyone loves that movie. 3 weeks to film.
Yeah. See,
so that's a normal production length for something that's not special effects heavy.
Right. See, my hometown, a lot of Gone Girl was filmed here locally, and I think
the most expensive Lifetime movie ever made, according to Honest Trailers.
Probably so. And I think they had kind of overran the town for a couple months, and shot in different locations throughout the city and down by the river and stuff.
That's your hometown, though?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Next time I watch that, I'm going to be like, oh.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, a good friend of mine delivered to the house, that the big nice house that they have, and I've delivered to them all too. But you see all the stores, and it's the that gazebo where they have the little visualette. That's the historic courthouse that's just right up the hill from the river's 2 blocks away, and yeah. Yep,
so was that like
Ben Affleck found out he was going to be Batman when he was in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. So.
If only he knew what laid in store for his time as Batman. So I do have to ask you though, like, was Gone Girl a huge deal when it was released, like in your town because it's shot there?
A little bit. It wasn't too much. A lot of people went and were extras, and I think they went to see if they made it in the movie or not.
So
me and my wife, it was funny. Me and my wife have this friend, and her name was Holly too, and she went and she was always dressed really nice, and so they made her a news reporter. I don't know if she made it in the movie or not, and they always left her in costume, but the actual TV news reporters from our town, they sent them to costume because they didn't look enough like news reporters. So, but she had a speaking line, but I don't know if it made the movie or not. I don't remember. So
I feel like that's such like a small town mentality thing. Like, so my wife's family is from a very small town, a small area of Canada, Newfoundland, St. John's. So whenever a pop culture, like a movie or TV show mentions them, they get so excited. Like I think do you remember the show Bones? I think an episode in their final season, I don't even think the actors flew up there to shoot. I think secondary went up and then they CGI'd them in later on. But they were so excited. And you hear it on our podcast too. Every time there's a Tulsa or Oklahoma connection, Tom and Julie get so excited. And it just reminds me, Aziz Ansari, Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec, for those who don't know, he has this funny comedy bit in one of his stand-up specials where he's talking about how somebody came up to him and said, "Oh, you must be really excited about Slumdog Millionaire." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm really excited because I'm Indian. Is this what white people feel all the time? Ghostbusters, that's us. The Godfather, that's us. Every movie that's not Slumdog Millionaire, that's us." I feel like, as somebody who lives in New York, that's what I feel like. Like, if I mentioned every connection to like an actor or like a movie that's in New York, I'd be like, every single movie, that's us.
Right. Yeah, they watching bits and pieces of it's like, it's there'll be a scene and there's a scene where there's a fisherman behind them with a goofy hat on. It's like, that's my high school art teacher, and I remember seeing him put a Facebook post up. He's like, "I went down there to be an extra. They said they needed fishermen," and he put on his fishing hat, and his wife's like, "Oh, you're gonna be wearing that stupid hat, ain't they? They don't want you," and they pick him because he's wearing his fishing hat, and all this stuff. And they bought a bunch of police cars and put, I think, Carthage or something like that's the name of the city in the movie, and they painted them up with the logos of the fictional city. But then when it was over, they pulled them off and repainted them for our city and donated them to the police department.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you an exclusive sad tale that I've never told anyone before.
Uh-oh.
So, obviously, being in New York, being around the doorstep of the city, a lot of stuff films here. A lot. One of the sorry about that, but that's actually relevant to the story. So when the Dark Knight Rises was filming, they shot a bunch of that on Wall Street. Their big climactic fight between Batman and Bane and the cops and Bane's guys took place on Wall Street. Right. And there was obviously casting call for the extras. We need cops and we need Bane's guys. And I considered putting in an application because they would take anyone as long as you're able-bodied, like and can stand on your feet. It was a quick paycheck, and you get to be in the movie. Like, maybe you'll see your face in the movie. But it's like, oh, I can't get off work, so I didn't even bother. And to this day, I regret it because I hated the job I was in at the time. I was like, why did I care?
Right.
So I passed up the ability to be a Gotham City policeman.
Oh my goodness.
I know. Mourn for me. That's the tiniest violin ever you hear playing right now, but it's depressing to me.
Did you ever hear Chris from Christmas Time in the City tell his Chris Evans story? I think he's on Fleece Christmas, Mary Davidad, and I guess they were filming Avengers or something, or maybe it was Captain America, the first Avenger, where Captain America runs out in that post-credit scene.
Oh, into Times Square.
Into Times Square. So he was like, I'll butcher this story, but I'll give it the best rendition I remember. He was that kind of down there, and he kind of just put headphones in, and he's like, you can kind of get anywhere if you act like you belong there, and he was just kind of walking around and stuff, and then he's like, he sees Chris Evans, and he's just over there, hitting the weights as hard as he can so he can look all ripped for the shot and all this stuff and then they finally wrapped, filming, and then some guy was like, "Hey, you need to put them dumbbells away. And like he worked there. So he went over there and he picked up Chris Evans' dumbbells and then just like moved them 10 feet and set them down and got out of there before he got busted that he wasn't supposed to be working there. So he's like, basically me and Chris Evans worked out with the same gym equipment. So
That is 100% accurate. You put on headphones, you can blend in anywhere. Because that happened. Something similar happened to me. I went to a presidential kickoff campaign for my chosen candidate, and I ended up in the journalist pen because I saw they didn't really separate them from the public. So like I saw a bunch of them going to the same place I was going to for coffee at this venue. So I followed a bunch of them in. I'm behind a bunch of these people I recognize from TV or their names from print. And like then I just followed them back to the area, and all of a sudden I find myself in the journalist pen. I'm like, this is awesome. And not one person questioned me for ages. And eventually Sarah texted me because she had a up close, I was like right in front of the podium spot, and I was like, "Peace! I got a better spot than you." But
yeah, it's pretty cool. But as far as like movies being filmed and stuff, that's kind of the only excitement I've ever had around here was Gone Girl when it was filmed. And
I mean, at least Batman was in your town. At least that's your claim to fame.
There was a movie that was filmed here before Gone Girl in the late 90s, early 2000s that I don't ever think made it to the theaters. And it had Diane Lane in it and Mickey Rourke. And I can't remember who the main character was. But the name slips my mind, but I'll think of it. I think Johnny Knoxville was in it too.
Diane Lane and Mickey Rourke movie?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was Mickey Rourke.
Was it called Kill Shot? Joseph
Kill
Gordon-Levitt?
Yes. Kill Shot is what it was. And it was filmed here mainly because of the location of the Mississippi River and stuff. And it's about a guy in a witness protection program who lived in Detroit as a welder for the auto manufacturer, witnessed a mob hit or something. So him and his wife get put in witness protection. So he's, down here working, in the dry docks, welding barges and stuff and things like that. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. But that wasn't as big a deal as
Gone Girl.
As Gone Girl was. So.
I mean, Gone Girl, the book was a huge deal before the movie. Right. And I remember reading that book, and I finished that book in a day because it was so well written. Yeah. But Honest Trailers is right. The movie version is like, as always, inferior to the book, and basically looked like a bad Lifetime movie. Right. But I'm going to say now, so for anyone who does listen to my book every week or read it every week and likes it and wants to see it be made into a movie and has some kind of connections, I will pull the author strings if you can make it happen and get you a walk-on part in the movie.
There you go.
Make it happen, y'all.
I'll email some people when we get off here. I want to be in the movie.
If anyone knows anyone, I have no doubt it would be you because you get a lot of cool guests on your show.
Oh, well, people such as yourself, as cool as you. But speaking of Christmas books that turn into Christmas movies, which we definitely hope Another Christmas Story is, probably the most popular book that's turned movie is A Christmas Carol.
Yes.
Okay. A Christmas Story was a book previously.
A collection of essays.
Yes.
Only one of which took place over Christmas. But yeah, then they pulled from the other essays. Yep.
It's a Wonderful Life was based on a short book as well.
I don't know why you're bringing that up during a Christmas discussion.
Because it's absolutely a Christmas movie.
Die Hard is based on a book.
Die Hard is based on a book. Is there any others that are based on a book?
The whole idea of the Christmas Groundhog Day is based on a short story called Christmas Every Day. Okay. So all those movies can attribute that.
Yeah.
2 Hallmark movies we covered, The Christmas Train and The 9 Lives of Christmas, are based on books.
Okay.
But I think actually Hallmark pulls a lot of their stuff from books because I think a lot of people do publish through Hallmark's imprint and then they just
see the Hallmark thing is kind of gets cloudy because it's like, okay, it might have technically been a book first, but it's like did you write the book so you could make the movie, or
Right.
or did the movie come out of it and then you adapted it for a book, but it's also closely tied together that they're inseparable?
Right. It's almost kind of like, did you even finish writing the book by the time Hallmark picked it up to do the movie, and then it happened concurrently? Yeah, I agree. That does get confusing.
I just had this thought, Anthony. Maybe me and you should purposely try to write a book to be accepted by Hallmark.
There you go. I'm all for this. That could be our. We could start that during the dead of summer, and that could be our 2021 into 2022 project.
Right.
We can write about a group of misfit Christmas podcasters.
Right. Well, the hero, the Christmas spirit person could be a Christmas podcaster. You know.
From the big city, who goes to a small town because it's it could be one of those towns like you must spend Christmas here on that list, and he meets some girl there, and the two of them fall. She's initially wary of him because he's like from the big city, and they fall in love.
He's got a big podcast, and he's got to set up like a little studio in this town that's got real shoddy internet.
Yep. And I am liking this. That's a Hallmark movie waiting to happen.
Yeah. So we definitely need to. We don't need to say any more ideas on here about it, but let's seriously try to do that. Try to see if we can write a story to purposely get to be made a Hallmark movie.
I'm all for it. I am all for it. My one condition is if it's made into a Hallmark movie, it doesn't have to be Danica, but it cannot be Candace.
No,
if we can agree on that.
No, I say anyone but Candace. # anyone but Candace.
Perfect. Danica it is. And if not Danica, then...
I'll tell you what. If they walk in the room and say it has to be Candace or it ain't happening, I'll be like, oh, fine. You win.
I mean, I guess better Candace as one of the leads and Kirk.
Right. And I'll pull this episode down before we do it. That way we don't. I'll just play Jingle Bells over this whole discussion.
Yeah, you'll get one of the troll podcasters like Tom downloading this episode and releasing it to TMZ right before a movie premieres. Like they plotted this.
We could base the big city villain after Tom. and we could have him on a video chat and the big CEO just freezes like his internet's froze up.
I like it. It's a plan. Yeah. No, but seriously, I think we need to explore this idea. I'm all for this.
I'm 100%. I'm 100% on board. I think we can. I think we can make something happen with it. It'd be a fun exercise anyway.
It will be a fun exercise.
Yeah. Yeah. Try to get it. Man,
got to create a shared doc and pile all our ideas in there.
Oh yeah, yeah. We got to determine, we're gonna have a bakery or a bookstore. Oh yeah, or a vinyl record store.
There you go.
Podcasting,
all of it.
Yeah,
and then you have to have some guy who's actually Santa.
Yeah, because we could be a podcaster, doing digital media versus the bookstore record store combo of the lady who just likes the old touch it and feel it type of media.
Yep. And then whichever big corporation is funding this podcast, they want to buy the bookstore, the vinyl store, and he's not aware and she thinks he's in on it, and it causes a big rift 3/4 of the way through the film.
Oh yeah. We can there you go. We can knock it out. We can definitely knock it out.
We can knock it out like that.
Yeah.
Real quick though, I do want to say, because I mean, if you're listening to my story, you'll notice I pulled a lot of inspiration from a lot of Christmas things, and that's because it is that's totally purposeful. It was meant to be a love letter and an homage to Christmas, New York City, and Christmas in New York City. But I mean, you'll notice one of the characters' last names is Rankin and Bass. One of the characters' names is Margot. Purposefully, so I could drop a joke later on in the book where someone says, "I don't know, Margot." Yeah, and you'll see I make the kids, they're young, but they're kind of wise beyond their years. And I said, well, if the Peanuts could do it, I can do that with my kids. I don't have to make them older. And
Right.
then you'll see as the story progresses throughout the year, a bunch of other homages. So I do want to just say to anyone who's reading it or listening to it and notices all of that,
Right.
it's not like a plagiarism thing. I mean it as loving homage. I'm paying tribute to all the amazing Christmas content that came before.
They are lovingly placed Christmas Easter eggs.
Exactly.
Yes, they are. Well, Anthony, thanks so much for joining me here on Christmas.
Sorry, I just wanted to say one last thing, and then you can. And you and Jerry will be happy to know there's a reference to "It's a Wonderful Life" and not Die Hard. So you won.
Well, I'm not in agreement with Jerry on Die Hard.
So. Okay, so Jerry won.
It's got too much Christmas in it. You know me, if it's got like a...
Well, that's true. If they mention Christmas, it's Christmas to you. And like, Die Hard has decorations, hats, the lights, music. Yeah, there you
go. Yeah. I mean, I'm one of those guys that's like, I think they had an evergreen tree in their yard, so I'm pretty sure it's a Christmas movie. You know? Well, man, thanks so much for joining me again here on Christmas Clatter. The book is called Another Christmas Story. It is found on the Tis the Podcast feed, wherever you find podcasts. It comes new chapters every Thursday. You can go back and listen to all the chapters again. You haven't missed anything. If you haven't heard anything yet, you can just go back and catch up as it is.
Right, and
go ahead.
They're easily findable too, because we have we have our podcast split into seasons. So we're currently on season 5 of the podcast, but since these are bonus episodes and not part of the regular podcast count, they're all labeled season 0 and labeled bonus episodes. So if you haven't been listening and want to download them all and find them all quickly, you can scroll down to season 0, and that's where they all are. So
very nice. Very nice. And let everybody know where they can find Tis the Podcast.
You can find Tis the Podcast. I'm so sorry.
You're fine. Don't worry about it.
You can find Tis the Podcast. You can find Tis the Podcast wherever your podcast can be found. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And you can visit our website at www.tissapodcast.com, upon which you can see our ultimate ranking of all the Christmas movies and television specials we've covered over the years, on which you can find actually the text to each chapter of Another Christmas Story, which I release concurrently with the audio version. So if you prefer to read it and not listen to it, that's all on the website. And you can find us all across social Facebook group, Twitter, Instagram. We are on YouTube, but YouTube will really take off soon. And Patreon, where as little as $1 per month, you can get full-length bonus episodes. Todd just joined me on a really fun one, in which we discussed the Hallmark 2021 Dream Book, along with a listener called Claude Belanger. I know I butchered that. He always tells me I butcher it, but and I can guarantee you, if you like the show, you have tons of Patreon content up there, and tons are coming this year. You're probably going to get 2 or 3 bonus episodes a week on Patreon come Halloween season, because as Todd knows, I'm already starting to record those. So there's a hint for something that's coming later this year. But again, every Thursday, Another Christmas Story. Check it out. And if you are enjoying it, share it with your friends and family. Like I said, I don't know if I'll ever be published or anything in the future. Hopefully, it's my dream, but in the meantime, I'm enjoying sharing it with you all, and I'd like to share it with even more people. So feel free to share it if you're enjoying it.
Alrighty, well, I appreciate it, and until we get to
I appreciate
talk again,
you. Thanks for having me on. It's always a blast.
Yes,
And listeners, June on Tis the Podcast is Todd month, so Todd will be showing up in your main feeds beginning of June, I think, or definitely sometime in June. I think it's beginning of June, so that'll be a fun episode. It's always a blast when Todd's on, so keep your eye on.
Then turn around again in July. We've got another episode scheduled.
In July, yep. Yes. And then, again, October, patrons. Todd will be on, I think, probably a few. I'm probably going to get him on a few. But definitely one.
Alrighty, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Todd.
And for those watching on YouTube, this podcast was hosted by Buzzsprout and recorded on Riverside.fm. And as always, remember, keep Christmas hope alive every day.